Hello everyone, it's Scott, and welcome to today's March the Machine spoiler video. And we've already talked about the best cards I think that are going to be from the set for Standard, and we've looked at the transforming double face cards as well in another video, and now we want to look at the top battles from March of the Machines. So before we get started though, special thanks to Campena Gamers for sponsoring our video series, and remember to like and subscribe so you can get further content like this as we move into March of the Machine Aftermath spoiler season, which will be in just a couple of weeks, and we'll be also talking about decks as we move forward on the channel. So let's talk about battles. So battles are obviously this new card type that we've seen. So I think as we think about battles, what we need to look at, and we'll move to our first battle here, is the front side of the card. Okay, is the front side of the card worth casting? And it's similar in a lot of ways to the prototype cards that we saw from the Brothers War. Is it worth casting it at its prototype cost? If it is, then it's a decent card. So let's start by looking at our battles. And again, the front side is really what our focus is. Is this worth playing on the front side? And then yes, if we can get it to flip, that's wonderful, and we get that ability on the back side. So our first card at number 10 is going to be Invasion. Because we have such good mana right now, meeting the requirement of one of each of the 5 colors probably isn't going to be a problem. In fact, a lot of decks right now are able to produce mana of 5 different colors, certainly by turn 5, and a lot of times they can produce those by turn 3 because of the tri-lands we got in New Campena. So this battle, it's 7 defense counters on it, and when Invasion of Alara enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile 2 non-land cards with mana value 4 or less. You may cast one of those 2 cards without paying its mana cost, and put one of them into your hand. Then put the other cards exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically for 5 mana, you get to search your library for 2 cards that are 4 mana value or less that are permanents, and then you can cast those, one of them for free, and then the other one goes in your hand. So right there, that's a pretty good ability on its own, because you don't know how far you're going to go down in the deck to get to those 2 non-lands cards that you're going to be able to cast. But for 5 mana, getting a card and getting to cast one for free is a decent card. And then on the backside, if you do flip it, you get Awaken the Maelstrom, which is all colors, and then target player draws 2 cards. You may put an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield. You can create a token that's a copy of a permanent you control, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 creatures you control, and then destroy target permanent an opponent controls. So the backside of this card is bonkers. The question is, can you do the 7 damage to get to this? And it will be interesting to see if some of the counter removal cards that we've seen in the set matter enough to be able to go ahead and take down a battle in the format. Because when you do, you've got cards like this that are really good on the backside that I think are going to be desirable to play. All right, at number 9, we have Invasion of Tolvata. For 3 white and a black mana, you get a Battle that's a Siege with 5 defense counters on it. And when Invasion of Tolvata enters the battlefield, return target non-battle permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is basically the same ability that has been bringing Atraxa back from the graveyard. You know, the entire the entire Phrexia all will be one season. So that in and of itself, to me, says this is playable. And then if you can defeat it, you can go ahead and knock the 5 defense counters down. Then you get the Broken Sky, and creature tokens you control get +1 and have lifelink. And in the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 black and white spirit creature token with flying. So the backside of this, I think, is okay, but the front side of it is it's a reanimator. It's worth it because you can reanimate Atraxa or any other really large creature you want to bring back from the graveyard. Okay, at 8, we've got Invasion of New Campena. For a white and a black mana, when Invasion of New Campena enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact or a creature. When you do, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls. Invasion of New Campena has 4 defense counters on it. So right on the front side, this is actually a slightly lower costed spell where you're sacrificing a creature or an artifact and then you destroy things. We've got already a couple of spells in Standard that see some play that do this for 3 mana. So being able to do it for 2, I think, is a plus ability. And again, being able to take out their biggest creature for 2 mana and a creature or an artifact is a very good value. And the fact that it gets exiled, that helps as well. And then if you can defeat the battle, then you get Holy Frazzle Cannon. It's an artifact. That's an equipment. It equips for 1. And whenever equipped creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it, on that creature, and each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. So I see this as a good backside of the card, because you're going to be able to play this in a tribal kind of deck, whether it's Phyrexian or Angels or Soldiers. You're going to be able to play this in a tribal deck that you're going to get that added advantage of it. When it attacks, everybody gets a +1/+1 counter, and you go from there. So that makes this certainly something I want the front side of, but the back side I want too. So I would want to try to get this to get that effect of getting those +1/+1 counters every single turn on it. Next, we have at number 7, Invasion of Asgal. For a black and a red mana, you get a siege, a battle that's a siege. It has 4 defense counters on it. And when Invasion of Asgal enters the battlefield, target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and loses 1 life. So I think this is a really good card, because for 2 mana, this is in essence Sheoldred's Edict, but you don't get to choose whether it's a creature or a planeswalker. But it's the same thing. And we've seen Sheoldred's Edict played across Standard throughout Phyrexia All Will Be One season. This is a good version of it to put in a Rakdos deck. And then when you defeat the battle, then you get Ashen Reaper. It's a zombie elemental. It's a 2/1 with Menace. And at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on Ashen Reaper if a permanent was put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn. So if you're able to kill something with the front side of it, and then you go ahead and defeat the battle on that turn, which is possible in black and red, then what you do is on the backside you get Ashen Reaper, and then on that same turn that it transformed, you're going to be able to put a +1/+1 counter on it immediately and make it a 3/2 and with Menace, and then you go from there. So I think this is a good card. Again, it just depends on how quickly our Rakdos builds are going to be able to move. Next, at number 6, we have Invasion of Ixalan. For 1 and a green mana, you get a Battle of the Siege with 4 defense counters on it. When Invasion of Ixalan enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So 2 mana, basically look at the top 5 of your cards of your deck, or your library, and then go ahead and choose one of those that's a permanent spell. So you're probably playing this in a dedicated creature deck, and this is a way to go get a creature potentially that you like, or if you need an additional land, you can get an additional land. So I think that in and of itself makes this very playable in Standard. And then on the backside, if you defeat it, you get Belligerent Regisaur. That's a 4/3 dinosaur. It has trample, and whenever you cast a spell, Belligerent Regisaur gains indestructible until end of turn. So basically, you're going to be able to cast a spell on your main phase when you've transformed this into Belligerent Regisaur. On your first main phase, you play something. It has indestructible. Now it attacks. Your opponent can't defeat it and kill it. And that's a powerful ability in and of itself, to have that recursive threat of 4 damage potentially every single turn going to your opponent's face. And trample, even if they block it with something, they have to block it with 4 toughness. Otherwise, it's going to do some damage anyway. So good card and a good backside. And if you notice that many of these cards I think are more playable have only 4 defense counters on them, and I think that's a big piece of evaluating them. You want things that have a low mana cost and have low defense counters on them to be able to flip them quickly to get to the backside, if the backside is something you really want. At number 5, we have Invasion of Fiora. For 4 and 2 black mana, we get a Battle of the Siege with 4 defense counters on it. So again, that low defense counter total. And when Invasion of Fiora enters the battlefield, choose one or both. Destroy all legendary creatures or destroy all non-legendary creatures. And for me, this fits really well into our Esper Legends deck. That deck it certainly doesn't have a problem getting to 6 mana, because a lot of times that deck is playing 27 or 28 lands. So you're going to be able to get there. And then to be able to do a one-sided board wipe is really powerful, because what you can do is on the turn that you play this, you probably are going to destroy all non-legendary creatures, which will get your opponent's side of the board down to just a few things. You can attack the battle and then flip it on your turn, on that same turn, and then you get Marchesa, Resolute Monarch, who's a human noble. That's a legendary creature. That's a 3/5. Marchesa has Menace and Death Touch, and whenever Marchesa, Resolute Monarch, attacks, remove all counters from up to one target permanent. So in a dedicated battle deck, if you can get this, you can flip it, then Marchesa can either kill a planeswalker or defeat a battle all on her own simply by attacking. And that's an incredibly powerful ability. So I can see this one-sided board wipe in Esper, and then after that, on the first time you can attack with it, you can either take out another battle, or you can go ahead and defeat a planeswalker, or just remove counters from anything that matters in the game. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you haven't been dealt combat damage since your last turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So it's just added value there of drawing a card if they can't do any damage to you. And I think that makes this a very playable card. Even though it's a high mana cost, it's very playable in Standard. All right, at number 3, we have Invasion of Reggaeta. For 2 and a red mana, you get a Battle of the Siege with 5 defense counters on it. And when Invasion of Reggaeta enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to another target battle or opponent, and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature. So you're getting some value, basically 5 damage across either an opponent, battle, and 1 damage to a creature. So that can hopefully, maybe knock out a small creature that's on the board that your opponent has. You do 4 damage to them, which helps you, defeat them a little bit faster. Or if you've got another battle on the field, you want to go ahead and do the 4 damage to that to get rid of it. Because again, what we've been talking about is a lot of the battles have 4 or less defense counters on it. So this is a way to simply, you play Invasion of Reggaeta on turn 3. You've already played a battle on turn 2. This will immediately defeat that battle and cause that card to flip, and you're off to the races. Now, if you can flip Invasion of Reggaeta, then Disciples of the Inferno, it transforms into, it's a 4/4 human monk with prowess, and if a non-creature source you control would deal damage to a creature, battle, or opponent, it deals that much damage +2. So this is, for me, the real payoff of this card. If you can defeat the battle, then you get a very, very powerful card on the backside, where again, it's got prowess, and then anytime a source deals damage to a creature, a battle, or an opponent, you're getting that additional 2 damage with it. So if you're able to do this, say, get this on turn 4, by turn 5 or turn 6, assuming you've got things that are able to do damage on the board, you're going to defeat your opponent relatively easily and quickly because of that additional damage that is going to get dealt this way. So I'm excited to try this card either in mono red or in an Is It Shell, so we can, kind of go ahead and work through this battle to get to the backside of it. At number 3, we have Invasion of Goombakin. For 1 and a white mana, you get a Battle of the Siege with 3 defense counters on it. And when Invasion of Goombakin enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. So this is Anointed Peacekeeper. This is a really good ability, and it costs less. We've seen this as a 3 mana spell in the past. It's a 2 mana spell here. So I think that in and of itself, and the fact that it exiles, it makes it permanently do that. If the battle's defeated, it doesn't take it away. That permanent nature of it, I think, is really powerful. And then if you can defeat it, which you shouldn't have too much of a problem doing, then you get Light Shield Array, which is an enchantment. And at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn. Sacrifice, and then it has a secondary ability, which is Sacrifice Light Shield Array. Creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So I really like this card, particularly in a soldiers deck. It could be, the Azorius soldiers or even a mono white soldiers deck potentially. Because if you cast this, say, on turn 3 and your opponent doesn't have really a board state yet, you're going to have 1, 2, maybe 3 creatures on the board at that point. You're probably going to be able to attack invasion quickly and go ahead and defeat it. And then every time you attack with something, if it survives the combat, then it gets a +1/+1 counter, and that in and of itself is a very powerful ability. And we already have, because of the prowess spells that we've seen, we saw one just a moment ago in Invasion of Reggaeta. I think that and this work together well. And the reason I'm saying that is there are a bunch of prowess creatures in Standard right now, and every time we're casting one of those, we cast one of these, it's a prowess trigger for all those cards. So you play, say, Monastery Swiftspear on turn 1. On turn 2, you play this. It does 2 damage to the battle. It's about ready to flip. On turn 3, you play it, so you can actually defeat the battle if you want to by playing Invasion of Reggaeta, or you can do the 4 damage to your opponent, and then if they don't have a blocker or something, your Swiftspear can go in and go ahead and defeat the battle. And then at that point, you're just moving through stuff, and everything's going to get +1/+1 counters, and that's just going to speed your game plan along. So I think this is very Standard applicable because of the low defense counters. And number 2, we have Invasion of New Phyrexia. For X, a white and a blue mana, you get a Battle of the Siege with 6 defense counters on it. So a lot more than what we've seen on other ones that are in this. But when Invasion of New Phyrexia enters the battlefield, create X 2/2 white and blue knight creature tokens with vigilance. So the reason I'm rating this so high is in the mid game, when you've got 5 or 6 mana, you can create 3, 4 2/2 knight tokens, and that's pretty good in that mid game. And in an Azorius control shell, this becomes an even better card because you're going to be able to create a bunch of these tokens and then probably attack the next turn and go ahead and defeat the battle. And once you've defeated the battle, then when it transforms, you get Teferi, Iconis of Zhalfir, which is a legendary planeswalker with the Teferi. He has 4 loyalty, and for +1, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. -2, you get an emblem with knights you control, get +1, and have ward 1. So I would say probably in a dedicated knight deck, which we know when we return this fall to Eldraine, then we're going to see a lot more knight cards in that set because that was a heavily knights set in the past. So we're going to have a bunch of knights, and having a knight tribal deck is going to be very easy in Standard. And being able to go ahead and -2 Teferi immediately, all your knights get +1 and they have ward 1. That's going to be a powerful ability. And then for -3, tap X creatures you control. When you do, shuffle target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value X or less into its owner's graveyard. So you just tap X creatures, and then you can send whatever creature you need to from your opponent's board presence into their library, which is a pretty powerful ability. Basically, it unwinds that card for you and puts it in a place where they're probably not getting it back on the next turn. So Teferi, a very good planeswalker and a very good card in general. And our last card of the day is Invasion of Chandelar. For 3 and 2 green mana, you get a battle that's a siege with 4 defense counters on it. And when Invasion of Chandelar enters the battlefield, return up to 3 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. I can see this fitting into a dedicated graveyard deck with no problem at all, or a deck that you're going to be have a lot of creatures you're going to be attacking with. This becomes the top end of that, and when you cast it, you're pulling 3 permanents from your graveyard, putting them back in your hand so you can recast things quickly, and then hopefully in 1 turn or less, you're going to be able to flip Invasion of Chandelar. And when you do, you get Leyline Surge, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So I can see this as, again, in a graveyard deck, this is a very good card. But just in general, the front side of it, returning 3 cards from your graveyard to your hand, that's a pretty good ability on its own. And the fact that you get to select those helps out a lot. So you can go get 3 cards that you really want that are going to help you win the game. And then once you flip it, then at the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to be able to put a creature card or a planeswalker card or any kind of permanent onto the battlefield. So if you've got a lot of high cost cards in your deck purposely, because you're going to try to flip this and then play those for free, it's an incredibly powerful card. So I think this is definitely going to see standard play, and I think this is actually what's going to push us into green in standard. And because of that, all the good green creatures that we've seen for the last 3 or 4 sets, they're finally going to get their time in the sun here as they get played with this particular saga, or sorry, with this particular siege in play. So that's our top 10 battles from March. I think it's a pretty interesting mechanic, and I think we'll find out more in that first couple of weeks of how people are using it. And one thing I would say with all of these are not only standard playable cards. Many of them, because they only cost 2 mana, they're playable in Pioneer. They're playable in Modern. And because of that, I think this is a mechanic that we're going to see played a lot more than some people think over the next few years. All right, so thanks for watching our video. Special thanks again to Campena Gamers for sponsoring our March of the Machine video series of previews. And please, if you haven't, remember to like and subscribe. And we'll be back with more March of the Machine content in the near future. Thanks for watching.